Oh, let's get comfy. Hi, welcome to a video I've been wanting to make for a really, really long time. It's about mental health. This is something very close to my heart, and I am finally starting a series to talk about it. For anyone that's visiting this channel for the first time, hi, my name is Avni. I do a bunch of fashion, makeup, some home reno stuff. As you can tell, I'm surrounded by plants out here. This is not how my living room generally looks, it's just for now. And of course, as you can tell from this very video that you're watching, I also talk about mental health and mental illness because I struggle with it just like a lot of other people, and I think we should be talking about it. Did you enjoy that little animation that I just learned how to make in After Effects? I'm so proud of myself for it. Are you proud of me? Be proud of me. Thanks. So, the series is called Things I Learned in Therapy, and it's pretty much what you get is what the label suggests. I want to talk about my experience with therapy because I really, really wish that I had some videos like these to watch when I was going through the journey for the first time and I was just a very new entrant to that world of getting help and seeking professional opinions on all of my issues that I'd sort of been hoarding away and pretending they didn't exist for years. So when I was trying to decide where to begin, because there's a lot, it's a very packed with twists and turns dramatic story that kind of feels like a TV show that I can't stop watching because, well, I'm kind of living it. So I asked Emmett, my boyfriend, where do I begin? And he was like, well, what was the first thing you learned in therapy? And, oh man, the first thing I learned in therapy was nothing, because it took almost 3 to 4 months after I decided I wanted to get professional help. It took me that long after to actually start therapy. And I think that is probably the first issue or key concern about this whole journey is the beginning is rough. Insurance is one of the biggest culprits because mental health, unlike physicality of things, does not come across in very visible, concrete ways. And so writing codes for insurance or like finding the right provider. Some companies just don't even have any mental health coverage. So all of that, coupled with the fact that you're going to be interacting with a whole other human being, and you're going to open up yourself and your entire box of, everything that you've been storing, it's very, very scary, and it's very intense. So worth it. Very worth it. I will say that right from the beginning. It is definitely worth it, but it's not easy. And I think everyone should go to therapy if they can, but that's the problem. Not everybody can. And it's not fair. It's not fair by any means, because when you're struggling with mental illness, the thing you need the most is also the hardest to get, which makes it a self-perpetuating cycle of not getting help but needing more help, and then not being able to get that help, which makes you need even more help. And it's just on and on. So all of that aside, let's start at the beginning of how I got to the point where I decided or felt like I absolutely couldn't go without therapy, and also like I was kind of ready for it. So depression has been my friend for almost as long as I can remember, but it really ramped up around 9th grade and started getting progressively more and more difficult to live with, and it started intruding into my regular functioning around college. So I think the first 5 or 6 years with depression were kind of just like with noticeable depression. Let's be clear about that. They were kind of like the occasional spurt where I felt like something wasn't right with me, but when I got to college, freshman year was great because I think I had all of the adrenaline from the new experience and the new people and just all of the enthusiasm of being in New York City also, which was something I'd always wanted. I think all of those things combined gave me that push that I needed to still keep going despite shifting out of my childhood home, away from family and friends and all of that. But come sophomore year, oh, it hit me so hard. I did not know what was happening. And well, I low-key kind of knew what was happening because I'd been taking these online quizzes about are you depressed? Clinical depression symptoms. I'd been taking these tests for almost 6 years now, and I'd been convincing myself that it was, just like a little bit of a hint of depression. Like, I'm not super depressed. I don't have clinical depression. I'm just, I'm just weird. I don't fit in. I don't belong. That's why I feel like this. So those were all things that I convinced myself of. Until sophomore year, I barely could make it to class, and things started slipping. Assignments were delayed. I was just constantly feeling like I was on the brink of collapse. I started crying a lot more, and let me tell you, I had historically not been a crier, but sophomore year and junior year, I was crying a lot. Not to say that crying was necessarily a symptom of depression, because some people feel really depressed and don't cry a lot. That's, also a possibility. But it was a shift for me that I wasn't comfortable with and I was not used to. So that was going on, but at the same time, I had enough moments to keep me going where I felt content or happy or satisfied, just like for a split second, that it kind of convinced me, I convinced myself, that is, that I didn't really need help, that I could just talk to my family about it, that I could talk to friends about it, and it would not necessarily go away, because I was never under any sort of false pretense of, if I just pretend this doesn't exist, it will go away. I wasn't in that boat, fortunately. But I just thought that it wouldn't be so bad anymore, because, logically, I had been functioning for almost 19 years as it was up until then. But then there was a clear trigger. There had to be, otherwise there was no way I was going to, of my own volition, look for a therapist and try to get that whole process started. Because I just was convinced that I was not in such a bad state. My situation was not as bad as it could be. And other people have it worse, of course, was also a slogan that I kept hearing thrown around. And I also convinced myself, ooh, I'm afraid of my hair burning a little bit. That has happened. I speak from experience. But anyway, so I sort of bought into that idea of my situation's not that bad. I should not play the victim, And then the trigger, as I mentioned, came December of 2018, when I had a really big holiday meal, and my stomach did not sit well with my system somehow. Even though it wasn't anything outrageous, it was just like red meat, which my body isn't super used to. So I started having a lot of stomach aches and cramps and just like 3 days of constant stomach aches. And the thing about physical pain for me and my family is we're all very healthy people. And so being like health conscious, being very into fitness and exercise, and trying to cure everything with exercise as opposed to medication, we're one of those families, which is, it works out great in some situations. In this particular one, it did not go well at all, because we don't generally fall ill, and now that I was having constant physical distress, I freaked out. I was like, this is it. I have some really bad major issue that I won't be able to handle. There were a few other factors, I think, that played into that moment. One being, I was visiting my boyfriend's mom for the first time. We were in her house. It was a completely new experience, new location, and that was when this was happening. I also had just figured out that the degree that I was getting wasn't necessarily what I wanted to do in the future. And to top it off, someone really close to me has died of an incurable physical illness. So all of those things combined made it so that I started having a lot of just like physical reactions that I was not prepared for. So that whole month after, well, almost 2 months actually, through till March, I was constantly throwing up. I was nauseous all the time. I couldn't take a car ride. Like, I couldn't even think of taking a car ride because just the idea of that sort of motion and being stuck in a small space would make me want to throw up. And it was not great. I was not able to leave the bed. I was not able to do any of the things that would have made me feel better, which is a fun fact about mental illness, is the very things that will help you feel better, you can't do. You physically just like will not be able to do the things that are helpful because your brain will convince you that there's no point doing them, or that you just don't have the energy. And that's, we'll get into all of that later, but for now, let's just say life was completely a train wreck. I was so reliant on Emmett that he would have to make me every meal for the day or I would not eat, because I just wouldn't be able to, because I was so afraid of throwing up and of being nauseous that I was ready to just like give in and rely on soup for the rest of my life to gain my nutrition for my body. So there were a lot of times where I genuinely was starting to think that I may have an intolerance for something, or I might have IBS, which is kind of an all-consuming gastro disorder. And when I talked to a couple of doctors, I went to the hospital a bunch of times because of how completely unable to function I was, and it was not great. When I went to every doctor, they said, "You're fine. Go home. You're fine. Nothing's wrong with you." They even ran a bunch of blood tests and things, and everything was normal. So I started to think, it's been a few months of this. If everything physically is normal, it must be mental. There's no way that 6 different doctors just accidentally happened to miss something that's causing me occasional pain. Now, that was the thing about this physical aspect of my mental health at the time. The biggest giveaway was that it was fleeting. There were days when I was in complete pain, but then one fine day it would just go away and I would be fine for many hours on end. And then once again, something would start hurting or would start feeling claustrophobic almost, even though historically I've never been claustrophobic. And so it was just weird things like that. The coming and going was kind of what keyed me into the fact that it must be mental. So then I started researching. I looked up IBS. Turns out a big part of IBS is your mental health, and it is psychosomatic. Now, this was a word that I was coming into a lot. I was running into a lot, because psychosomatic is basically the mind-body connection is so powerful that a lot of times things that are actually because of your thoughts, you can feel physically. And the physical part can actually feel like it's separate and unrelated to anything else that's going on in your head, but the two are ultimately connected. And it's just a very messy mixture of thoughts and physical sensation. The two get fused or are actually inherently related a lot more than we give them credit for. So I was going through a bunch of psychosomatic things at the time. I felt dizzy when I was thinking about certain things, which I realized in retrospect is there were a lot of factors that were causing me to bring up a lot of difficult thoughts, and that was getting coupled with the issues of my physical being. And that turned into a cycle because I was afraid of the physical symptoms because, as I said, my family and I, super healthy people. So anytime I'm not feeling physically well, I lose it. I lose my bearings completely because I'm not used to it. It's a completely unfamiliar space. And when you're not used to something, if you keep being forced to face it, you start to really believe that something's awfully wrong. And that's what was happening. So come March, it had been almost 2.5, 3 months of this nonsense, complete garbage. And I said, hey, so we can't keep going like this. There's no way I'm 21. There's no way I'm living the rest of my life just like hobbling along in like the little 8x6 bedroom and not moving and being too afraid to leave, even to go to get myself a glass of water from the kitchen. There's no way we're living like that. Especially because it was so different from who I was before that. Like, I love my independence. I love being able to do 12 different things in a day and still have time to do a few other things. And all of that was gone. It just was not a thing anymore. It was just disappeared. And it was just disappeared. It's completely wrong grammar, but you get the point. So I made the decision, and so the process began. I went through a bunch of different websites, such a do-it-yourself method because there's no real organization, even on the internet, to give people resources to find therapists or providers near them. Insurance websites are really crap at it because a lot of times insurances will list providers on their like finding catalog tool or whatever, and you call up that provider and they're like, no, I haven't heard of this insurance. What are you talking about? I don't take this. And similarly, a lot of people, a lot of professionals on things like Psychology Today, which is where I found my therapist, a lot of people's websites, profiles, or bios are out of date. They're so old, they may not even be in the country, in your city, or whatever. All of that said, I found a bunch of people, shortlisted, almost like I was looking to hire people for a job. I found their strengths, their weaknesses, and I was like, this person fits okay, shortlisted. This person seems to have a good, just someone I could have a rapport with, shortlisted. And then from that list, I called a bunch of people. A few people were full and were not taking new patients, which is the next fun thing about trying to find a therapist, is the good ones, more often than not, the exact time that you need them, they don't have availability, which means that you're either going to have to make the decision to wait until they have availability, which could be anywhere from a few weeks to years. So you have that option, or you have to give up on that one great therapist and settle for someone else. It kind of, when I say it like that, it sounds like shopping, where you're like, oh, that one great item that I found online is out of stock, so I need something right now, so I'm just gonna buy this other makeshift substitute, but you always keep thinking of that one great item that you found, And that's kind of what it felt like for a bit while I was hunting, is there were so many therapists that I kept getting attached to without even meeting them, by the way, let me tell you. It was just based off of how they scripted their bios online. And sometimes I would have a phone call for like an introductory intake phone call, and it would just not go great at all. Like the person that I'd sort of been dreaming about having as my therapist, I called her and we just didn't vibe. Like we just didn't click, And sometimes there's nothing wrong with that person or with you. It's just a gap in how you communicate, maybe, or just who you are as people, even. The truth is, I feel like dating is so much easier than finding a therapist. I know that's a controversial statement because some people really go ham on the fact that dating is extra hard, but I promise you, finding a therapist that works for you and that everything sits right with is much harder, because it's such an unspoken wavelength thing. Sometimes you're getting along fine, but it doesn't, have that pizzazz. It's true though. I know this is a bit like absurd and silly, but it's true. It really, really, when you find the right connection with that therapist, it feels, or it should feel. So this was something that one of my friends told me when I asked her, hey, how did you know that your current therapist was the one, And she said, well, talking to your therapist should feel not forced. It should feel kind of like talking to a friend. Just like you can have free-flowing conversation, and that's really all it is. It's about what works for you and what you feel like you need from the other person, almost like, hey, any other relationship with a partner. So there are some therapists that are super hand-holdy. They will kind of just, wait around for you to get to the conclusion, and they will just coax you and push you as you go. And there are some therapists who are super, super direct and very no nonsense, hardcore, just this is what's happening, here's what you're going through, here's where you're wrong, here's where you're right, and here's what I think. And sometimes they can be malleable to both sides. They can be a mix of both sides. And it depends on what you need. If you have a specific way that you want the other person to be, I would highly recommend talking to them about it before you even start therapy. So any good therapist will always and should ask you if you have any questions or what your thoughts are in that introductory phone call. If they don't, it's a little weird, because the whole point of this relationship that you're going to build with them is for them to listen to what you need. So yeah, ask them, talk to them, tell them, hey, here's what I think I need. If they think that it works, it works. If not, notice how they let you down, let you down sounds weird. Let you down gently, essentially, is what I'm trying to say. They may or may not agree. That is also a thing where, just like every relationship with a friend, family, partners, whoever, you won't agree always. You're going to have disagreements. Look at how you disagree, because that is so much more important than how you agree. Agreement is well and good, it's validating and all of that, yada yada. But when you disagree badly, it can go so terribly for your mental health, because it's one thing to have a disagreement with someone else, but it's a whole other thing to have a disagreement that's pretty intense with someone who's literally in your head and who knows all of your insecurities and your, just like you have a personal relationship with them, like a super intimate one. That kind of disagreement can sometimes lead to really long-term impact, and it can lead to long-lasting damage. So in that introductory phone call, beware and watch out for how your interactions go, and use that to talk about their style. Talk about what happens if you both have different ideas of how to proceed on things. What happens then? All of these questions I wish I had at the time. I got really lucky and my therapist worked out and I didn't have to go through too much trouble initially. There were some questionable experiences later, but initially it started out great. I didn't know though. Whenever I got asked, do you have any questions or concerns? I was like, no, not at this time. But also it worked out because I was going off of gut instinct a lot more, and I gotta say, my gut, super powerful radar. It's so strong. Like, I suss out people faster than, those people in Among Us who are like, oh, it's Lime. Lime is the imposter. My gut is just way faster than that when I'm talking to people. So in that first meeting, basically just be as upfront and direct and clear as you can be. Write stuff down if you have trouble remembering things. Just write stuff down if you're nervous, all of those things. Speaking of nervousness, I forgot one of the most key things that led me to my journey with therapy. Anxiety. I've struggled with depression for a really, really long time, so I'd gotten super comfortable with it. It was like a, plushie that lived in my room, and we had a sort of, weird relationship, but it was there for so long in my life that I didn't want to get rid of it, and I was kind of comfortable with it. Enter anxiety, and that messed up my head because I have not been an anxious person in the past, but with all of the health issues and the idea of starting therapy, all of it combined made me so anxious. I was just jittery, constantly on edge and not able to sleep, shaking, nauseous, all of the, fun stuff. We'll get into the anxiety, depression, symptoms, fun tidbits later in a different episode, but as it stands right now, in that story so far, I finally found a therapist after many initial intake sessions with a bunch of different therapists. And fun fact, the way I found my current therapist, who I absolutely love, is because she was late to our first phone call. And she kind of left me a voicemail that said, hey, sorry, I'm running a little behind. Talk soon. And that just made me connect with her on such a human level, Like, it just, oh man, it made me feel like this was someone that I could open up to without being judged. And I think that is so, so, so important. Therapy is your space. It is for you to just be whoever you want to be yourself, talk about things that you care about without worries, without concerns that the other person is going to be weirded out or the other person is going to get bored. Yeah, you're paying them a lot of money, because the other thing is therapy is expensive. Therapy is so expensive. I would not be able to afford it if my family was not helping me pay for it right now. Therapy is insane, okay? Because it's a really, really difficult and just like consuming job. It takes over your mind to help someone with their issues, of course. So makes sense that it's expensive, but also it's not accessible to everyone. Makes it really, really difficult for people who aren't financially stable or privileged. So anyway, point being, my therapist was a little late, and that made me connect with her on a very outside of therapy kind of level. So yeah, I did find a really good therapist, and it's been a whole journey, which we will unravel and unwrap as we continue with this series. I talked a lot, so let's hydrate. If you're watching this right now and haven't drunk water in a while, hydrate. Water's great for you. Also for your mental health, incidentally. So that was a lot of talking. I hope it was useful and helpful in just like giving you insight if you haven't ever been to therapy, into what that process is like to even start with. And I can't wait to keep sharing more about my journey with therapy and just what makes all of this worth it, what makes mental illnesses, what comprises of that experience, and also how things shift and change, and because there's a lot of change, there's so much change, some good, some bad, but all very, very useful. I hope you come back for the next one, if I haven't talked your ear off in this one. Thanks for watching, and I will see you very soon, hopefully.